Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 780th night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Hassan the goldsmith told his mother what he had done with alchemy, and cried, I have learned this art and mystery, she laughed at him, saying, There is no majesty, and there is no might, save in Allah the glorious, the great. And she was silent for vexation. Then of his ignorance he took a metal mortar, and returning to the shop, laid it before the Persian, who was still sitting there, and who asked him, O my son, what wilt thou do with this mortar? Hassan answered, Let us put it in the fire, and make it lumps of gold. The Persian laughed and rejoined, O my son, art thou jinn mad, that thou wouldest go down into the market with 2 ingots of gold in 1 day? Knowest thou not that the folk would suspect us, and our lives would be lost? Now, O my son, and I teach thee this craft, thou must practice it but once in each 12-month, for that will suffice thee from year to year. Cried Hassan, True, O my lord, and sitting down to open his shop, set on the crucible and cast more charcoal on the fire. Quoth the Persian, What wilt thou, O my son? And quoth Hassan, Teach me this craft. There is no majesty, and there is no might, save in Allah the glorious, the great. Exclaimed the Persian, laughing, Verily, O my son, thou art little of wit, and in no wise fitted for this noble craft. Did ever any during all his life learn this art on the beaten way or in the bazaars? If we busy ourselves with it here, the folk will say of us, These practice alchemy, and the magistrates will hear of us, and we shall lose our lives. Wherefore, O my son, an thou desire to learn this mystery forthright, come thou with me to my house. So Hassan barred his shop, and went with alchemy. But on the way he remembered his mother's words, and thinking in himself 1,000 thoughts, he stood still with bowed head. The Persian turned, and seeing him thus standing, laughed, and said to him, Art thou mad? What? I in my heart purpose thee good, and thou misdoubtest I will harm thee? Presently adding, But if thou fear to go with me to my house, I will go with thee to thine, and teach thee there. Hassan replied, 'Tis well, O uncle. And the Persian rejoined, Go thou before me. So Hassan led the way to his own house, and entering told his mother of the Persian's coming, for he had left him standing at the door. She ordered the house for them, and when she had made an end of furnishing and adorning it, her son bade her to go to one of the neighbors' lodgings. So she left her home to them, and wended her way, whereupon Hassan brought in the Persian, who entered after asking leave. Then he took in hand a dish, and going to the market, returned with food, which he set before the Persian, saying, Eat, O my lord, that between us there may be bread and salt, and may Almighty Allah do vengeance upon the traitor to bread and salt. The Persian replied with a smile, True, O my son, who knoweth the virtue and worth of bread and salt? Then he came forward and ate with Hassan till they were satisfied, after which alchemy said, O my son Hassan, bring us somewhat of sweetmeats. So Hassan went to the market, rejoicing in his words, and returned with 10 saucers of sweetmeats, of which they both ate. And the Persian said, May Allah abundantly requite thee, O my son. It is the like of thee with whom folk company, and whom they discover their secrets, and teach what may profit him. Then said he, O Hassan, bring the gear. But hardly did Hassan hear these words than he went forth like a colt let out to grass in springtide, and hastening to the shop, fetched the apparatus and set it before the Persian, who pulled out a piece of paper and said, O Hassan, by the bond of bread and salt, wert thou not dearer to me than my son, I would not let thee into the mysteries of this art, for I have none of the elixir left, save what is in this paper. But by and by I will compound the simples whereof it is composed, and will make it before thee. Know, O my son Hassan, that to every 10 pounds of copper thou must set half a drachm of that which is in this paper, and the whole 10 will presently become unalloyed virgin gold. Presently adding, O my son, O Hassan, there are in this paper 3 ounces Egyptian measure, and when it is spent, I will make thee other and more. Hassan took the packet, and finding therein a yellow powder, finer than the first, said to the Persian, O my lord, what is the name of this substance, and to where is it found, and how was it made? But he laughed, longing to get hold of the youth, and replied, Of what dost thou question? Indeed, thou art a froward boy. Do thy work, and hold thy peace. So Hassan arose, and fetching a brass platter from the house, shore it in shreds, and threw it into the melting pot. Then he scattered on it a little of the powder from the paper, and it became a lump of pure gold. When he saw this, he joyed with exceeding joy, and was filled with amazement, and could not think of nothing save the gold. But whilst he was occupied with taking up the lumps of metal from the melting pot, the Persian pulled out of his turban in haste a packet of Cretan bang, which if any elephant smelt, he would sleep from night to night, and cutting of it little thereof, put it in the piece of the sweetmeat. Then said he, O Hassan, thou art become my very son, and dearer to me than soul and wealth. And I have a daughter, whose like never have eyes beheld for beauty and loveliness, symmetry and perfect grace. Now I see that thou befittest none but her, and she none but thee. Wherefore, if be Allah's will, I will marry thee to her. Replied Hassan, I am thy servant, and what so good thou dost with me will be a deposit with the Almighty. And the Persian rejoined, O my son, have fair patience, and fair shall betide thee. Therewith he gave him a piece of sweetmeat, and he took it, and kissing his hand, put it in his mouth, knowing not what was hidden for him in it only after time, for only the Lord of futurity knoweth the future. But hardly had he swallowed it when he fell down, head foregoing heels, and was lost to the world. Whereupon the Persian, seeing him in such a calamitous case, rejoiced exceedingly, and cried, Thou hast fallen into my snares, O gallias, carrion, O dog of the Arabs. This many a year have I sought thee, and now I have found thee, O Hassan. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 781st night, she pursued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Hassan the goldsmith ate the bit of sweetmeat given to him by the Ajami, and fell fainting to the ground, the Persian rejoiced exceedingly, and cried, This many a year have I sought thee, and now I have found thee. Then he girt himself, and pinioned Hassan's arms, and binding his feet to his hands, laid him in a chest, which he emptied to that end, and locked it upon him. Moreover, he cleared another chest, and laying therein all Hassan's valuables, together with the piece of the first gold lump and the second ingot, which he had made, locked it with a padlock. Then he ran to the market, and fetching a porter, took up the two chests, and made off with them to a place within sight of the city, where he set them down on the seashore, hard by a vessel at anchor there. Now this craft had been freighted and fitted out by the Persian, and her master was awaiting him. So when the crew saw him, they came to him, and bore the two chests on board. Then the Persian called out to the Ras, or captain, saying, Up, and let us be off, for I have done my desires, and won my wish. So the skipper sang out to the sailors, saying, Weigh anchor, and set sail. And the ship put out to sea with a fair wind. So far concerning the Persian. But as regards Hassan's mother, she awaited him till supper time, but hearing nothing, sound, nor news of him, she went to the house, and finding it thrown open, entered and saw nothing therein, and missed the two chests and their valuables, wherefore she knew that her son was lost, and that doom had overtaken him. And she buffeted her face, and rent her raiment, crying out and wailing, and saying, Alas, my son! Ah! Alas, the fruit of my vitals! Ah! And she recited these two couplets. My patience fails me, and grows anxiety, and with your absence growth of grief I see. By Allah, patience went what time ye went, loss of all hope, how suffer patiently? When lost, my loved one, how can I enjoy my sleep? Who shall enjoy such life of low degree? Thou art gone, and desolating house and home, hast fouled the fount erst flowed with foulness free. Thou wast my fame, my grace, midfolk my stay, mine aid wast thou in all adversity. Perish the day when from mine eyes they bore my friend, till sight I thee returned to me. And she ceased not to weep, and wailed till the dawn, when the neighbors came in to her, and asked her of her son. And she told them what had befallen him with the Persian, assured that she should never, never see him again. Then she went round about the house, weeping and wending. She spied 2 lines written upon the wall. So she sent for the scholar, who read them to her, and they were these. Layla's phantom came by night when drowsiness had overcome me, towards morning while my companions were sleeping in the desert. But when we awoke to behold the nightly phantom, I saw the air vacant, and the place of visitation was distant. When Hassan's mother read these lines, she shrieked and said, "Yes, oh my son, indeed the house is desolate, and the visitation place is distant." Then the neighbors took leave of her, and after they had prayed that she might be vouchsafed patience and speedy return with her son, went away. But she ceased not to weep all watches of the night and tides of the day, and she built a middlemost the house a tomb wherein she let write Hassan's name and the date of his loss. Thenceforth she quitted it not, but made a habit of increasingly bidding there by night and day. Such was her case. But touching her son Hassan and the alchemy, this Persian was a magian who hated Moslems with exceeding hatred and destroyed all who fell into his power. He was a lewd and filthy villain, a hankerer after alchemy, an astrologer and hunter of hidden hoards, such as the one as he of whom the quoth poet, a dog fathered by dog grandsire bred, no good in dog from dog race issued. Ein, for a gnat no resting place gives he, who is composed of seed by all men shed. The name of this accursed was Bahram the Gibru, and he was wont every year to take a Moslem and cut his throat for his own purposes. So when he had carried out his plot against Hassan the goldsmith, they sailed on from dawn till dark, when the ship made fast to the shore for the night, and at sunrise, when they set sail again, Bahram bade his black slaves and white servants bring him the chest wherein was Hassan. They did so, and he opened it, and taking out the young man, made him sniff of vinegar and blew a powder into his nostrils. Hassan sneezed and vomited the bong. Then, opening his eyes, he looked about him right and left, and found himself middleward the sea, on aboard a ship in full sail, and saw the Persian sitting by him. Wherefore he knew that the accursed magian had put a cheat on him, and that he had fallen into the very peril against which his mother had warned him. So he spake the saying which shall never shame the sayer, to wit, "There is no majesty, and there is no might, save in Allah, the glorious, the great. Verily, we are Allah's, and unto him we are returning. O my God, be thou gracious to me in thine appointment, and give me patience to endure this thine affliction, O Lord of the 3 worlds." Then he turned to the Persian and bespoke him softly, saying, "O my father, what fashion is this, and where is the covenant of bread and salt, and the oath thou swearest to me?" And Bahram stared at him and replied, "O dog, knoweth the like of me bond of bread and salt? I have slain of youths like thee 1,000, save one, and thou shalt make up the 1,000. And he cried out at him, and Hassan was silent, knowing that the fate shaft had shot him. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 782nd night, she resumed, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Hassan beheld himself fallen into the hands of the damned Persian, he bespoke him softly, but gained naught thereby, for the alchemy cried out at him in wrath, so he was silent, knowing that the fate shot had been shot at him. Then the accursed bade loose his pinion bonds, and they gave him a little water to drink, whilst the magian laughed and said, 'By the virtue of the fire and the light and the shade of the heat, methought thou wouldest fall into my nets. But the fire empowered me over thee, and helped me to lay hold upon thee, that I might win my wish and return and make thee a sacrifice to her, so she may accept of me.' Quoth Hassan, 'Thou hast foully betrayed bread and salt.' Whereupon the magus raised his hand and dealt him such a buffet that he fell, and biting the deck with his foreteeth, swooned away, whilst the tears trickled down his cheek. Then the Gubra bade his servants light him a fire, and Hassan said, 'What wilt thou do with it?' Replied the magian, 'This is the fire, lady of light and sparks bright. This is what I worship, and if thou wilt worship her even as I, verily I will give thee half my monies, and marry thee to my maiden daughter.' Thereupon Hassan cried angrily at him, "Woe to thee! Thou art a miscreant Magian, who to fire dost pray in lieu of the king of omnipotent sway, creator of night and day. And this is naught but a calamity among creeds." At this the Magian was wroth, and said to him, "Wilt thou not then conform with me, O dog of the Arabs, and enter my faith?" But Hassan consented not to this. So the accursed Gubra arose, and prostrating himself to the fire, bade his pages throw him flat on his face. They did so, and he beat him with a hide whip of plaited thongs, till his flanks were laid open, whilst he cried aloud for aid. But none aided him, and besought protection, but none protected him. Then he raised his eyes to the almighty powerful king, and sought of him succor in the name of the chosen prophet. And indeed patience failed him. His tears ran down his cheeks like rain, and he repeated these couplets twain. "In patience, O my God, thy doom forecast, I'll bear, and thereby come thy grace at last. They've dealt us wrong, transgressed and ordered ill. Haply thy grace shall pardon what is past." Then the Magian bade his negro slaves raise him to a sitting position, and bring him somewhat of meat and drink. So they set food before him, but he consented not to eat or drink. And Bahram ceased not to torment him day and night during the whole voyage, whilst Hassan took patience, and humbled himself in supplication before Almighty Allah, to whom belong honor and glory. Whereby the Gubra's heart was hardened against him. They ceased not to sail the sea 3 months, during which time Hassan was continually tortured, till Allah Almighty sent forth upon them a foul wind, and the sea grew black, and rose against the ship by reason of the fierce gale. Whereupon quoth the captain and crew, "By Allah, this is all on account of yonder youth, who hath been these 3 months in torture with this Magian. Indeed, this is not allowed of God the Most High." Then they rose against the Magian, and slew his servants and all who were with him. At which, when he saw this, he made sure of death, and feared for himself. So he loosed Hassan from his bonds, and pulling off the ragged clothes the youth had on, clad him in others, and made excuses to him, and promised to teach him the craft, and restore him to his native land, saying, "O my son, return me not evil for that which I have done with thee." Quoth Hassan, "How can I ever rely upon thee again?" And quoth Bahram, "O my son, but for sin there is no pardon. Indeed, I did all these doings with thee, but to try thy patience, and thou knowest the case is altogether in the hands of Allah." So the crew and captain rejoined and rejoiced in Hassan's release, and he called down blessings on them, and praised the Almighty, and thanked him. With this the wind was stilled, and the sky cleared, and a fair breeze they continued their voyage. Then said Hassan to Bahram, "O master, whither wendest thou?" Replied the Magian, "O my son, I am bound for the mountain of clouds, where is the elixir which we use in alchemy." And the group swore to him by the fire and the light that he had no longer any cause to fear him. So Hassan's heart was set at ease, and rejoicing at the Persian's words, he continued to eat and drink and sleep with the Magian, who clad him in his own raiment. They ceased not sailing on another 3 months, when the ship came to anchor off a long shoreline of many colored pebbles, white and yellow and sky blue and black and every other hue. And the Magian sprang up and said, "O Hassan, come, let us go ashore, for we have reached the place of our wish and will." So Hassan rose, and he landed with Bahram after the Persian had commended his goods to the captain's care. They walked on the inland, till they were far enough from the ship to be out of sight, when Bahram sat down, and taking from his pocket a kettle drum of copper and a silken strap, worked in gold with carats, beat the drum with a strap until there arose a cloud of dust from the further side of the waste. Hassan marveled at the Magian's doing, and was afraid of him. He repented of having come ashore with him, and his color changed. But Bahram looked at him and said, "What aileth thee, O my son? By the truth of the fire and the light, thou hast naught to fear from me, and were it not that my wish may never be won save by thy means, I had not brought thee ashore. So rejoice at all good, for yonder cloud of dust is the dust of somewhat we will mount, and which will aid us to cut across the wold, make easy to us the hardship thereof. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 783rd night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Persian said to Hassan, In very sooth, yonder dust cloud is the cloud of something we will mount, and which will aid us to cut across the wold, and will make easy to us the hardships thereof. Presently the dust lifted off 3 she-dromedaries, one of which Bahram mounted, and Hassan another. Then they loaded their victuals on the third, and fared on 7 days, till they came to a wide campaign. And descending into its midst, they saw a dome vaulted with 4 pilasters of red gold. So they alighted, and entering thereunder, ate and drank, and took their rest. Anon Hassan glanced aside, seeing from afar something lofty, said to the magian, What is that, O nuncle? Bahram replied, "'Tis a palace." And quoth Hassan, "Wilt thou not go thither, that we may enter, and there repose ourselves, and solace ourselves with inspecting it?" But the Persian was wroth, and said, "Name not to me yonder palace, for therein dwelleth a foe with whom thou befell me somewhat, whereof this is no time to tell thee." Then he beat the kettle drum, and up came the dromedaries, and they mounted, and fared on for another 7 days. On the 8th day the magian said, "O Hassan, what seest thou?" Hassan replied, "I see clouds and mist twixt east and west." Quoth Bahram, "That is neither clouds nor mist, but a vast mountain, and a lofty whereon the clouds split, and there are no clouds above it, for its exceeding height and surpassing elevation. Yon mount is my goal, and thereon is the need we seek. 'Tis for that I brought thee hither, for my wish may not be won save at thy hands." Hassan, hearing this, gave his life up for lost, and said to the magian, "By the right of that thou worshipest, and by the faith wherein thou believest, I conjure thee to tell me what is the object wherefore thou hast brought me." Bahram replied, "The art of alchemy may not be accomplished save by means of an herb which groweth in the place where the clouds pass, whereon they split. Such a site is yonder mountain upon whose head the herb groweth, and I propose to send thee thither to fetch it. And when we have it, I will show thee the secret of this craft, which thou desirest to learn." Hassan answered in his fear, "'Tis well, O my master." And indeed he despaired of life, and wept for his parting from his parents and people, and patrol steed, repenting him of having gainsaid his mother, and reciting these 2 couplets. "Consider but thy Lord, his work shall bring comfort to thee with quick relief and near. Despair not when thou sufferest sore bane. In bane how many blessed boons appear." They ceased not faring on till they came to the foothills of that mountain, where they halted. And Hassan saw thereon a palace, and asked Bahram, "What be yonder palace?" Whereto he answered, "'Tis the abode of the Jann, and the ghouls, and Satans." Then the magian alighted, and making Hassan also dismount from his dromedary, kissed his head, and said to him, "Bear me no will anent that I did with thee, for I will keep guard over thee and thine ascent to the palace. And I conjure thee not to trick and cheat me of aught thou shalt bring therefrom, and thou wilt share equally therein." And Hassan replied, "To hear is to obey." Then Bahram opened a bag, and taking out a hand mill and a sufficiency of wheat, ground the grain and kneaded 3 round cakes of the flour, after which he lighted a fire and baked the bannocks. Then he took up the copper kettle drum and beat it with the broidered strap, whereupon came the dromedaries. He chose out one and said, "Hearken, O my son, O Hassan, to what I am about to enjoin on thee." And Hassan replied, "'Tis well." Bahram continued, "Lie down on this skin, and I will sew thee up therein, and lay thee on the ground, whereupon the rackham birds will come to thee, and carry thee to the mountain top. Take this knife with thee, and when thou feelest that the birds have done flying, and have set thee down, slit open therein the skin, and come forth. The vultures then take fright at thee, and fly away. Whereupon do thou look down from the mountain head, and speak to me, and I will tell thee what to do." So he sewed him up in the skin, placing therein 3 cakes and a leathern bottle full of water, and withdrew to a distance. Presently, a vulture pounced upon him, and taking him up, flew away with him to the mountain top, and there set him down. As soon as Hassan felt himself on the ground, he slit the skin, and coming forth, called out to the magian, who, hearing his speech, rejoiced and danced for excess of joy, saying to him, "Look behind thee, and tell me what thou seest." Hassan looked, and seeing many rotten bones and much wood, told Bahram what he said. "This be what we need and seek. Make 6 bundles of the wood, and throw them down to me, for this is wherewithal we do alchemy." So he threw him the 6 bundles, and when he had gotten them into his power, he said to Hassan, "O gallows bird, I have won my wish of thee, and now, if thou wilt, thou mayest abide on this mountain, or cast thyself down to the earth and perish." So saying, he left him, and went away. And Hassan exclaimed, "There is no majesty, and there is no might, save in Allah, the glorious, the great. This hound hath played the traitor with me." And he sat bemoaning himself and reciting these couplets. When God, upon a man, possessed of reason, hearing, and sight, his will and ought to pass would bring, he stops his ears and blinds his eyes and draws his wits from him as one draws out the hairs to paste that cling. Till his decrees fulfilled, he gives him back his wit, that therewithal he may receive admonishing. So say thou not of aught that haps. How happened it? For fate and fortune fixed do order everything. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 784th night, she pursued, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the magian sent Hassan to the mountain top, he made him throw down all he required. He presently reviled him, and left him, and wended his ways, and the youth exclaimed, 'There is no majesty, and there is no might, save in Allah, the glorious, the great. This damned hound hath played the traitor.' Then he rose to his feet, and looking right and left, after which he walked on along the mountain top, in mind making certain of death. He fared on thus till he came to the counterslope of the mountain, along which he saw a dark blue sea, dashing with billows, clashing and yeasting waves, each as it were a lofty mount. So he sat down and repeated what he might of the Koran, and besought Allah the Most High to ease him of his troubles, or by death or by deliverance from such strait. Then he recited for himself the funeral prayer, and cast himself down into the main, but the waves bore him up by Allah's grace. Excuse me. So that he reached the water unhurt, and the angel whose charge is the sea watched over him, so that the billows bore him safe to land by the decree of the Most High. Thereupon he rejoiced and praised Almighty Allah, and thanked him, after which he walked on in quest of something to eat for stress of hunger, and came presently to the place where he had halted with the magian Bahram. Then he fared on a while, till behold, he caught sight of a great palace rising high in air, and knew it for that which he had questioned the Persian, and he went and replied, "Therein dwelleth a foe of mine." Hassan said to himself, "By Allah, needs I must enter yonder palace. Perchance relief awaiteth me there." So coming to it, and finding the gate open, he entered the vestibule, where he saw seated on a bench 2 girls, like twin moons, with a chess-cloth before them, and they went a-playing. One of them raised her head to him, cried out for joy, saying, "By Allah, here is a son of Adam, and methinks 'tis he who Bahram the magician brought hither this year." So Hassan, hearing her words, cast himself at their feet, and wept with sore weeping, and said, "Yes, O my ladies, by Allah, I am indeed that unhappy." Then said the younger damsel to her elder sister, "Bear witness against me, O my sister, that this is my brother by covenant of Allah, and that I will die for his death, and live for his life, and joy for his joy, and mourn for his mourning." So saying, she arose and embraced him, and kissed him, and presently taking by the hand, and her sister with her, led him to the palace, where she did off his ragged clothes, and brought him a suit of king's raiment, wherewith she arrayed him. Moreover, she made ready all manner of viands, and set them before him, and he ate with him, and she and her sister. Then said they to him, Tell us thy tale with yonder dog, the wicked, the wizard, from the time of thy falling into his hands to that of thy freeing thee from him, and after we will tell thee all that hath passed between us and him, so thou mayest be on thy guard against him, and thou see him again. Hearing these words, and finding himself thus kindly received, Hassan took heart of grace and reason, returned to him, and he related to them all that had befallen him with the Magian from first to last. Then they asked, Did thou ask him of this palace? And he answered, Yes. But he said, Name it not to me, for it belongeth to ghouls and satans. At this the two damsels waxed wroth with exceeding wrath, and said, Did that miscreant style us ghouls and satans? And Hassan answered, Yes. Cried the younger sister, By Allah, I will assuredly do him die with a foulest death, and make him to lack the wind of the world. Quoth Hassan, And how wilt thou get at him to kill him? For he is a crafty magician. And quoth she, He is in a garden by name of Al-Mushiard, and there is no help but I slay him before long. Then said her sister, Sooth spake Hassan in everything he hath recounted to us of this cur. But now tell him our tale, that all of it may abide in his memory. So the younger said to him, Know, O my brother, that we are daughters of a king of the mightiest kings of the Jann, having marids for troops and guards and servants, and Almighty Allah blessed him with 7 daughters by one wife. But of his folly, such jealousy and stiff-neckedness and pride beyond compare got hold of him, that he would not give us in marriage to anyone. And summoning his wazirs and emirs, he said to them, Can you tell me of any place untrodden by the tread of men and jinn, and abounding in trees and fruits and rills? And quoth they, What wilt thou thereof, O king of the age? And quoth he, I desire there to lodge my 7 daughters. Answered they, O king, the place for them is the castle of the mountain of the clouds, built by an Ifrit of the rebellious jinn, who revolted from the covenant of our Lord Solomon, on whom be the peace. Since his destruction none hath dwelt there, but nor man nor jinni, for 'tis cut off, and none may win in it. And the castle is girt about with trees and fruits and rills, and the water running about is sweeter than honey and colder than snow. None who is afflicted with leprosy or elephantitis or whatever, naught else drinketh thereof, but he is healed forthright. Hearing this, our father sent us hither with an escort of his troops and guards, and provided us with all that we need here. When he is minded to ride to us, he beateth the kettle drum, whereupon all his hosts present themselves before him, and he chooseth whom he shall ride, and dismisseth the rest. But when he desireth that we shall visit him, he commandeth his followers, the enchanters, to fetch us, and carry us up to the presence, so he may solace himself with our society, and we accomplish our desire of him, after which they again carry us on back hither. Our 5 other sisters are gone a-hunting in our desert, wherein are wild beasts, past compact or calculation, and it being our turn to do this, we too abode at home to make ready for them food. Indeed, we have besought Allah, extolled and exalted be he, to vouchsafe us a son of Adam to cheer us with his company, and praised be he who hath brought thee to us. So be of good cheer, and keep thine eyes cool and clear, for no harm shall befall thee. Hassan rejoiced and said, Alhamdulillah, laud to the Lord who guideth us to the path of deliverance, and inclineth hearts to us. Then his sister rose, and taking by the hand, led him into a private chamber, where she brought out to him linen and furniture that no mortal can avail unto. Presently the other damsels returned from the haunting and birding, and their sisters acquainted them with Hassan's case. Whereupon they rejoiced in him, and giving in to him in his chamber, saluted him with the salam, and gave him joy of his safety. Then he abode with them in all solace of life and its joyance, riding out with them to the chase, and taking his pleasure with them, whilst they entreated him courteously, and cheered him with converse, till his sadness ceased from him, and he recovered health and strength, and his body waxed stout and fat, by dint of fair treatment and pleasant time, among the 7 moons in that fair palace, with its gardens and flowers. For indeed he led the delightsomeness of life with these damsels, who delighted in him, and yet more in them. And they used to give him drinks of the honeydew of their lips, their beauties with the high bosoms, adorned with grace and loveliness, the perfection of brilliancy, and in shape very symmetry. Moreover, the youngest princess told her sisters how Bahram the Magian had made them out as ghouls and demons and satans, and they swear that they would surely slay him. Next year, the accursed Kubra again made his appearance, having with him a handsome young Moslem, as he were the moon, bound hand and foot, and tormented with grievous tortures, and alighted with him below the palace walls. Now Hassan was sitting under the trees by the side of the stream, and when he espied Bahram, his heart fluttered, his hue changed, and he smote hand upon hand. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say, and so do I cease my telling of this tale until it be morrow.